Oh man, we had good shit there too.
Waiting for next year.
Waiting for next year.
Oh, it's the Waiting for Next Year.com podcast. You might have heard Andrew talking over the open there. That's because we've been talking for, I think, 15 minutes now, maybe 20 minutes, and I never hit record. I never hit record. Andrew, how you doing?
I am still doing great for the first time.
Oh my goodness gracious. We had some really good stuff too. We were talking about the NBA.
It's probably the best podcast we've ever done. And now we got to really bring that energy back up.
Well, I'm glad I got to hear it. So we're talking NBA trade deadline. We're gonna gloss over the transactional stuff because honestly, as Cavaliers fans, it doesn't really matter that much. You were impressed by what Toronto did and the arms race in the East.
Yeah, I liked what Toronto did, and I also I liked what Philadelphia did, and I thought that I really liked the way these teams who have lost to LeBron 8 years in a row in the finals kind of realized like this is our moment now. LeBron's finally gone. We get to try and seize this opportunity, and so a couple teams are really going for it, and so I really liked that. So, that was probably what I liked the most about this trade deadline. But it was an exciting trade deadline in general, anyways. I feel like in recent years there's been not a lot that's really happened.
So how good do the Raptors get with Gasol? I mean, obviously he's a good player, but it's a weird thing in this day and age of the NBA.
He is, but I feel like he's a huge upgrade over Valanciunas.
Oh yeah.
And I think that it gives Toronto a little bit of a dynamic they've never had before, and plus with having Kawhi, which is another dynamic that they've never had before, I actually think there's a lot you can do between Kawhi and Gasol.
The irony is they finally built a team that might have been able to beat the LeBron-led Cavaliers, and
exactly.
he ain't here.
Exactly. So yeah, those are the moves I like.
So, but we're less interested in kind of that horse race mentality. The idea is that the NBA seems to keep focusing on selling chaos, and the more that they seem to do it, the less. The more normalized it becomes for NBA fans, and you wonder how long the chaos is going to sell the way that it seems to sell, not only to the reporters but to the fans. And I'll keep referencing what we used to talk about before I ever hit record. But like I think peak chaos, masturbatory chaos was the DeAndre Jordan negotiation where they locked him in and they blocked the door with the chair and everybody was creaming their shorts over that. And it's like, does it really matter?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked a little bit too about this idea that, for fans, that there's this idea that when a player demands a trade, there's a knee-jerk reaction for fans to get super excited about it. And they rush to Twitter and talk about this is the best league, and this is why the NBA is the greatest. And it's like, well, you also have like
NBA, NBA.
But it's like meanwhile, you've got a lot of star players devastating fan bases out there. I mean, we've seen a lot of that the last few years. Dating back, from LeBron leaving the first time. You have LeBron hurt the Miami fans when he came back to Cleveland. You have Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis. I mean, Kyrie Irving, Paul George asking out of Indiana. Like on and on and on. Like there's all these guys are just devastating these fan bases.
Well, and in fairness to LeBron, he at least only left when he was a free agent. That's what Bill Simmons keeps calling it pre-agency, where guys like Kyrie Irving can demand trades, and now Anthony Davis demands a trade. And it's almost feels like justice to me as that outsider that the Pelicans decided to say no.
Yeah,
at least for now.
Well, and that's sort of the escalation of it. That's where it starts out kind of slow, and you have just a couple different players, wielding their free agency power. But then as agents start to get a little bit more creative, and in the NBA, I don't know if you really want to call it collusion. I'm not comfortable necessarily calling it that. Although I think New Orleans certainly feels very strongly that that is. But like, when you have, I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm making an accusation, but when Rich Paul is best friends with LeBron James, and he represents Anthony Davis.
Oh, it's the
Anthony
biggest
Davis
joke in
suddenly,
professional sports.
Asked for a trade. Are you telling me LeBron wasn't consulted on this? So there's this idea that, as the players are sort of shuffling the deck a little bit. And like, again, people can debate, what's so bad about that, and that's fine. But again, I'll go back to the fact that we are having a lot of fan bases getting seriously hurt in all of this. So that's why I don't like to celebrate it quite as much as maybe I once did. I think I've kind of grown a little tired of it a little bit. And for me, I don't watch the NBA for the entertainment aspect of the moves and all of that stuff. Like, I like the sport. That's why I like it. To me, the sport is the healthiest when the stars are spread out. When I grew up, I want to be an old guy here, but when I grew up, there was a star on almost every team. Almost every team had a guy that was exciting to watch. And, they wouldn't necessarily be a good team, but they would at least have players that were fun to watch and they could engage fan bases and all that stuff. And you don't see it quite as much today anymore. I mean, there's a lot of NBA teams that are they're tough to watch, and I don't think that's healthy for the sport overall.
No, and on top of that, the thing that really drove me crazy about this trade deadline was, and we talked about it behind the scenes of Waiting for Next Year, there was the video that LeBron posted on his Instagram where he was critical of the Harrison Barnes trade that happened in the middle of the game, and the cameras are focusing in on Harrison Barnes, and there's question as to whether he knew or when he knew, and all these different things. And it really kind of bugs me, especially coming from LeBron, that he's going to try and paint Harrison Barnes as some kind of a victim of circumstance or of this league, and that, it's offset. Next time a player tries to use their free agency or tries to demand a trade, remember that these teams make business decisions all the time. And that really bugged me a lot because on the one hand, like, Harrison Barnes has a $94 million contract, and like, that contract includes the fact that he could end up fulfilling that contract for any team in the league. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that going in. But now all of a sudden, if a team makes a trade, he's some kind of a victim. But if he decides to up and leave, or if he's a star like LeBron and he demands a trade, or he's Anthony Davis and he demands a trade, like, that's not written into the deal. Like, nobody goes into it thinking that that's okay. And yet that's kind of what's happening now. And for everybody that feels bad for Harrison Barnes, like, I think they're kind of missing the boat, especially if they're following the logic of LeBron James, because for everybody that he is out there to support, how many times has LeBron James held up a front office and said, you guys need to do something. We're not competitive and I need changes. And then all of a sudden, Drew Gooden and Larry Hughes and Shannon Brown get traded elsewhere. And how many victims did he create, like Harrison Barnes, with that kind of maneuvering behind the scenes? And the fact that Rich Paul he basically owns an agency. And so for him to be like, I'm Mr. Player Rep, I guess it's consistent with the message of somebody who owns an agency. He's basically an agent, but I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. And if we're following the script from our last one, this is the part where I get to make fun of Kevin Durant for a long time.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But one thing that just kind of occurred to me, though, as you're mentioning that, LeBron wants to ultimately own an NBA team someday. I wonder how he's going to feel about this when he's a team owner as opposed to a player. I wonder if he'll feel a little bit differently about.
Well, just like the Lakers hired a former agent to be their GM, Rich Paul's going to be the GM.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And LeBron will never be upset about it because he'll be on the winning side. He'll be the guy.
Exactly.
He doesn't know what it's like to lose, really.
No. But for me, when I think I agree with pretty much everything you said. I'll just kind of, again, I reiterate that I don't know how motivated the league is to change a lot of what's happening, because as much as there's a lot of fan bases that are hurt by it, there's a couple simple truths to all of this. And the first one is that when these players group up, it's exciting for the media. And it is exciting for a large portion of the fans too. Like there's a reason ratings are healthy and people are watching, and the media, they love what could have been more exciting than LeBron going to the Lakers. That's an incredibly exciting story. And so when Anthony Davis asks for a trade, they're all clamoring for Anthony Davis to go there because they want to write about Anthony Davis and LeBron James playing together. And ESPN can create their own verticals dedicated to LeBron and the Warriors and whoever else, whatever is in that moment. They get to basically cover that, and they generate traffic, and so money's flowing, everything's going well, and I think from that point of view, I don't think the league is particularly motivated to change any of it. But as far as LeBron, his deep concern for Harrison Barnes, I think that I sort of related it to Kevin Durant in the way Kevin Durant sort of wants it both ways too. That when he left the Thunder and went to the Warriors, I think he thought in his mind, that yes, this is going to be the best move for him because it's going to get him his championship. And if you want to go down, be in the discussion at some point of the greatest of the greats, you have to win championships. People don't even, a lot of people who are younger than us don't realize how great Charles Barkley was. Charles Barkley would be in a different tier of conversation if he would have won some championships. And so history doesn't care about what kind of teams you had. They don't care how bad those Sixers teams were that Barkley played on before he went to the Suns. That all of that melts away. It's a simple binary: did you win a championship or not? And so from that point of view, Kevin Durant thought, well, this is going to be the smartest move. But he also wants to be treated like he lifted a franchise up. Like he wants to be that guy, this transcendent player. Because when you look at what LeBron did for Cleveland, you can't get much more transcendent than that and lifting a franchise up. And it drives Kevin Durant batshit crazy that he doesn't get that same degree of respect that LeBron does. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. You could sit there and say, well, LeBron left, or LeBron teamed up with Wade and Bosh, and he teamed up with Kyrie and Love. I get that. I do, but it's not the same as going and joining a 73-win Golden State Warriors team that had already won a championship. It's just not. And so you don't get to have that both ways. And so I look at, LeBron, he kind of like, it's just, to me, it's just sort of this idea of the superstar that they want to set their own narrative for what's happening. And so, LeBron to some degree wants to cover for his buddy AD, who he's trying to get to Los Angeles, right? Like he wants to provide a little bit of cover for him and say, well, you can't get down on him because look at the flip side is Harrison Barnes, when the reality is all of this is being driven by LeBron and Kevin Durant and the decisions they're making. So.
Well, and Kevin Durant and his decision not to talk to the media, and then his decision to finally, when he does talk to the media, kind of like, wrap everybody's knuckles over it and everything else. It's like he's just very unrealistic, and the punching down at beat reporters drives me crazy. You're Kevin Durant. You've done what you've done. At least you could own it. Like, as you were saying, like he doesn't get to be that scrappy upstart company, it's like that startup culture, and you're that startup company, and you're building your way to a million customers and everything else. And then you decide to sell to Amazon or Facebook. Like he is like Instagram, you're no longer the upstart app, the scrappy underdog upstart that everybody's rooting for when you sell to Facebook. Now you're just a division of Facebook. Kevin Durant is a division of Facebook.
That was an amazing analogy you just came up with off the top of your head.
It's like I never said it before in my life. It was so much better when it was off the top of my head too, because I really didn't think about that ahead of time. That sounded like rehearsed or scripted.
Yeah.
I think we're almost to the end of the part where we were just on, where we lost our way. What a disaster.
Right. Yeah. So now we get to do the fresh part of the podcast.
Yeah. So I don't know where the NBA goes from here, by the way. I did say in I think I was saying this at the end of our last failed podcast that, I'm not against the players. I'm really not. If they were sitting at the table of the next collective bargaining agreement and they want an extra 5%, I would hear it. It's fine. But I think their version of player movement is sometimes kind of disastrous or random or hurtful to fans. And, maybe the NBA doesn't care about that. I know there are a lot of NBA fans. Who don't really care about any one team in particular. But that's not me. And so maybe the NBA won't be for me in the long run, but I expect at some point that they will kind of fight about it a little bit, because for every player who wants to exercise their free agency or pre-agency by demanding a trade, there's a billionaire owner and a million fans in a marketplace that get hurt by it. And I'm not trying to paint Dan Gilbert as a sympathetic figure. Trust me, I'm really not. But for every billionaire owner who's unsympathetic, like, there really are potentially millions of fans of that team that are just like caught in the wake of something like where there's no rhyme or reason to it anymore.
So I think there could eventually hit some kind of a tipping point where you do manage to turn off enough of your base who have been burned by stars.
And there aren't enough of those like transactional fans who just love the transaction enough to make up for it. Yeah.
So once we hit some kind of a tipping point and the ratings start to go down, I think that's when the league will say we have a problem here and we need to maybe look at some solutions. I think one of the more real fascinating ones that Nam has had in Slack, he's talked to us about it. I think he's mentioned it on Twitter before too. This idea of not having max contracts. I think that would be a really interesting way to handle this, because now if suddenly, if the salary cap is whatever, if it's $80 million, but you want to give LeBron James $70 million, you're not going to have any other stars on that team. And so that would be a really interesting way to have this fine balancing act of how many stars can you really fit under that situation. And because right now when we talk about like the Bird rules and the way that's set up, that guy's going to leave money on the table if he leaves, we're talking like $5 million, right? Like,
well, let's talk about Anthony Davis, because he can sign a $240 million contract with New Orleans, or he can wait it out and he can sign a like $205 million contract. But either way, $200 million is so much money that the last 30 doesn't mean that much to these guys.
Because he'll more than recoup it playing next to LeBron James in Los Angeles or next to Kyrie Irving in Boston or wherever.
And even if he doesn't recoup it, it's $200 million. It's no longer like, it's no longer $12 million a year.
Right.
It's so much money that it just doesn't matter.
But if there wasn't max contracts and suddenly there's a team that says, we'll give you $50 million a year, now we're talking about real money. When that contract suddenly balloons up to $400 million over the lifetime of a contract, that's a lot of money to leave on the table. And so I think it would be a really fascinating way of letting the league sort itself out. Now, the question you have to be concerned about, though, is are you going to squeeze out your middle class?
Yeah, you very well might. It'd be like the NFL where the quarterbacks make $30 million and everybody else is squeezing, or they're looking for rookies. But I'm with you. And I've always said that the NBA should have one player who's totally uncapped. Like, he doesn't even count against the cap.
I mean, it would be interesting to see how that would shake out. But I mean, I don't know what your other obvious answers are. You know, if the league does decide at some point that, hey, you know, this is a problem and we need to figure this out, you know, that, you know, they could go to a more of a hard cap. That would probably be one way of doing it, but I would imagine the players would fight pretty strongly against a stronger cap because that would really limit overall player salary.
So what do you think about the fact that all this player movement is happening and apparently like the players colluding is no big deal, but the natural response to that is tanking and the league is now making rules to go against that? It seems wildly inconsistent to me to realize what the reality is and then, you know, go against tanking at the same time, even though I hate tanking because it sucks for fans, but like, I don't know what the other option is. So
I was very surprised that the league actually acted on it. I really didn't think they would. And boy, I hope I'm not repeating myself because I can't remember if I said this on the first podcast or not. But like for a team like Cleveland, you know, with Kyrie asking for a trade out of here, LeBron walking away from the team twice, like it's pretty clear we're not going to be a superstar destination. We're not going to be a place that can draw stars through free agency. That's not an avenue for us. So the way the Cavs have to get their stars is by drafting them. And so the league's kind of saying, well, okay, that's cool and all, but we're going to ding you on, you know, the odds of doing that and make it harder for you to build your team this way through the draft. And the reason I'm surprised the league acted on it is because I don't think what they did is a deterrent at all. Like,
I don't think so either.
This season is a pretty clear indicator that it's not.
Yeah, man, look at the Knicks.
You know, the Knicks are tanking like crazy. Phoenix, the Cavs. Well, there's somebody else that's right there too. And now, you know, Washington didn't necessarily do it on purpose, but you know, like it'd be interesting to see what happens with Washington now that you know they're going the direction there. There's Chicago. Chicago's the other team
right.
doing a masterful job of tanking this year.
Not surprisingly, I always forget Chicago.
Yeah. And so, you know, the point is you have all these teams gunning for the bottom three. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're the worst one team, but they're all still tanking just as hard to ensure that they get in that bottom three because it's super competitive. So the easiest way to make sure you're in the bottom three is to just be the worst team in the NBA. So they didn't really fix anything, and all it's kind of doing is hurting these teams that are at the bottom. And it's tough for us as Cavs fans because it's like, you know, we went through one stretch of pretty ridiculous lottery luck, and I think we'd be foolish to expect to see history repeat itself there. But the odds this time are going to make it a lot harder for us to do what we did last time when LeBron left.
Yeah, I mean, we know the player movement hurts small market teams, and now the tanking rules hurt small market teams. And like that was the one thing that depressed me the most about, you know, not even saying I'm mad at LeBron or whatever, but the realization you wake up one day and you're like, oh yeah, I don't think there's any actual path back for the Cavaliers. And it's going to be really hard for them to have any kind of sustained success. It does give me, say what you want about Colin Sexton and how he's developed as a player. It does give me a little bit of hope that they were looking for a guy who actually wanted to be here, who they thought would stay here long term, because that's got to be part of the equation for the Cavaliers moving forward. If you just take best player available and it's some guy who's got stars in his eyes for LA, even before he's drafted, he's going to be miserable kind of even before he begins. He's going to be a failure, and the Cavs aren't going to win by just, you know, kind of handcuffing talent like that. But it's a governor on the team.
Yeah. And I think I've mentioned this in Slack before, but that's the thing that worries me is, you know, let's say the Cavs do win the lottery and they get Zion Williamson, you wonder, like, can they hang on to him, or are they on an instant timer?
Yeah, let me answer that question. No.
You know, how soon before he asks for a trade somewhere? And, you know, because, you know, it used to be, the way it used to really work was, you had 4 years on that rookie deal, and you felt pretty confident they were going to sign that second 3-year deal. 7 years was the magic number. So you felt like you could keep your rookie for 7 years, and if you hadn't done anything to prove that you could keep them by then, that's when they would walk in free agency, or sometimes you would trade them in that last year if it was clear. But like you said, the pre-agency, we saw Kyrie do it with multiple years on his contract. Anthony Davis asked for the trade with multiple years on the contract. Like, they're pushing that timetable up, and so you just wonder if Zion Williamson gets here. What if after 3 years the Cavs aren't going anywhere? Does he just say, "I want out of here"? So it's a scary proposition for sure when you're trying to figure out. I mean, I don't think you can build your team with that fear. You have to just trust that you can hang on to them by proving to them that you're going to add good players. You just have to try and actually follow through and do that. But it's definitely a scary thing that's going to be in the back of all of our minds.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get off sports for a minute. Let's finish this in some entertainment stuff. Especially, I want to talk in an area that you know very well. You were one of the earliest cord cutters that I know. And now, Disney is doing their Netflix competitor, and you've got Hulu and all these other things. Are you now paying almost as much as you used to for cable?
I am not paying anywhere near as much as I was, but part of what has to be factored into that is that I had Netflix and Hulu when I had cable as well.
That's a good point.
So
did I, by the way.
Yeah, and so it's always tricky when people try to ask me, well, how much money did you save? And it's like, well, it depends on how you want to look at it. Because yes, my Hulu, I have the Hulu Live, I have the no commercials package, and I have HBO package bundled in there with it. So,
do you ever take a break from that HBO, by the way, or do you just keep it straight on through?
Well, I got a really good deal on this one, and I forgot to cancel it when the deal ran out. And
it's almost like they count on that.
Well, they do for sure. And but now we're so close to Game of Thrones that I'll just hang on to it through Game of Thrones and then kind of figure out. But yeah, I mean, so it's ramped up to where that package alone is like $55 when you add all of those things. So I'm like, so if you sit there and say, well, your cable is whatever you pay, is it really a savings? And it's not when you do that 1-to-1 comparison. But to my budget, it still is a very big savings because I had like all of this stuff anyways. I had Netflix, I had Hulu without commercials, I had I even had HBO through what is it, HBO Now or HBO?
Right.
I always forget which one's which. But,
yeah, me too.
But so my point is just that I had a lot of these subscription services anyway. So to my budget, it is a big savings. But you're definitely right that they're nickel and diming it back up to where it's not as clear cut of a cost savings as it once was.
Yeah, for me, it was a much easier equation because I was overpaying for DirecTV. So I actually saved $100 a month, $1,200 a year.
Yeah. Well, I had Uverse, which was awesome service, and I loved it.
Sure.
But they were way overpriced too. So I was spending like, I don't know, I think I was in like $130 a month, somewhere around there. So
I don't know that I can jump to Hulu Live though. I really love what YouTube TV's been doing. I love the service. I love the way it's laid out. And that's one of the most interesting things to me as a brand, a relatively new convert to the streaming game is the first thing that you realize is just how bad the user interfaces were and how little innovation they had done as far as like scrolling around in your cable box and everything else. Like now with YouTube TV, I use it through Apple TV. I can voice to search. I hit the search button and it pops up on my phone and says, it looks like you want to type something. You want to type it on your phone? And I can search for anything. And if it's available anywhere, it'll figure out where. Just that idea that it operates more like a search engine in a computer as opposed to, well, let me scroll through the channels on the guide and see what's on. Like that might be the dumbest looking user interface in the world now. I'll never be able to go back in that respect, no matter what happens.
Yeah, I don't know if you had that initial. I had a little bit when I first did it, where it was like this. I don't know what to watch. Like I'd turn on my TV because you were so programmed to just flip through channels, right, or to flip through the guide and be like, oh man, I don't know what to watch. Well,
see, we waited so long that we were kind of barely watching our DirecTV anyway. We were going straight to Netflix. We were going straight to whatever.
Yeah. So like that really hit me at first. That it was like, wow, this is a totally different way to watch TV. But like I realized I used to watch so much terrible crap that I didn't care about.
Because there was a switching cost.
You know what? And you going back to Seinfeld and to the famous like the show about nothing. He's like, well, then why are you watching it? And George says, because it's on. And like that was this idea, like you would just watch something because it was on, and that doesn't exist when you cut the cord and you go to purely on demand. Like now you're watching stuff that you're seeking out, that you want to watch, and it's fun to like go through and like figure out like, okay, well, what shows do I want to watch? And you can add them to a watch list, or like Hulu Live lets you put it into like a collections tab, where you can have all the stuff that you want to watch. And to me, I like it so much better because I'm much more focused sort of in the things I want to watch. And then also, not to mention, like I find myself, I just watch a lot more YouTube now. Like I'll just be curious about how does something work, and I can just search YouTube and watch a half-hour tutorial on learning a new skill or something like that.
That's one of the cool things about YouTube TV too, by the way, is that content kind of lives in the same ecosystem now as my live TV. So the other thing that occurs to me is that, and we've been through this time and time again now, because the internet's been around this long, and you and I have been through the music wars and everything else, and music piracy. And now there's almost no music piracy because people they either watch it for free on YouTube, or they subscribe to something, or they listen to the quote unquote radio via Pandora. And piracy is gone. But TV's in that awkward phase, and I use TV kind of loosely. It's in that awkward phase where the walled gardens still exist. And so a lot of these content producers are going to find their stuff stolen because it's too easy to share it so people could watch it for free. And it's not easy enough to just pay for it in a reasonable way. Like if you're an NFL fan and you want to watch an out of market game, and like, there's no easy way to just give $4 to DirecTV. Otherwise, I think a lot of people would just do it to watch that one game. Instead, it's like, well, let me hit Reddit, let me find a stream, or maybe I just won't watch it at all. But it's like history is repeating itself for the video industry the way it did for the music industry.
You also have the borrowing of people's passwords, like, oh, let me borrow your Sunday ticket password.
Yeah, that's more of the gray, but you're right. Yeah, that's big.
But I'm, just there's ways that people are getting around paying for their watchable content. I do like, for the longest time, it felt like there were always all these rumors that Apple had something in the works, that they were going to really be the one to innovate and come up with what the iPod did to music. They were going to do that to TV,
including a TV set.
Right, exactly. That was the big rumor, was it was this iTV or whatever it was going to be, the Apple TV. But that sort of never really came to fruition in the way anybody ever anticipated. I think we don't have that great big innovation yet. That nobody's figured out a way to start finding a way to just monetize it in a way that the consumers say, you know what, I would much rather just pay for this than go through the hassle of finding a stream on Reddit. And that hasn't happened. And that's what killed piracy. It was the moment you could just give Spotify $10 a month, rather than having to dig through all these forums and Trojan viruses and the Wild West.
Or like some indie rock band that wanted to be heard and labeled all their stuff as Death Cab.
Exactly. I mean, it was all this, and then half the time you wouldn't know what kind of quality you were getting with the music files, and it was bad. It was bad. It was not a great way. And not that you should have sympathy for the music fans that were involved in piracy because they were stealing music, but that's the reality. That was the world we lived in. That's how people were listening to music, and it was not great.
And a lot of people had no sympathy for the labels because guys like you and me, I had to buy Pretty Hate Machine on tape and CD. I bought 10 on tape and CD. So screw them.
Yep. And
by the way, I would also, you and I talk about this all the time too. I would pay double for Spotify.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, as much as it's sort of cliche for the bands to, not cliche, but it's like sort of the in thing is for bands to sort of push back against Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music, all these streaming services. I still look at it as a net positive for the music overall, like that people aren't stealing music anymore, and the quality of music that people are listening to is way better and more consistent. So that's all good. So the question is how do we change TV in a fundamental way that stops people from borrowing a password? Like they say, you know what, it'd just be easier for me to pay this money than it would be to borrow somebody's password or go to Reddit and find a stream or do whatever.
We're about to get to the DRM wars. Remember the DRM wars in music?
You know. So I don't know what that's going to look like. But I do think that there's like this. I think that this a la carte idea has been really attractive to people for a long time, and I don't think anybody's ever figured out a way to properly monetize that. But if they could do that, I think that would be maybe the first step that we would see. But it hasn't happened yet. You know, we're still even. Excuse me. If you're doing Hulu Live, you're paying for channels that you couldn't care less about, and if you Sling TV, it was the same thing.
YouTube TV, I'm paying for a bunch of channels I'll never watch.
Yep. So that still exists, and I think that they just need to figure all that out, a way to be more consumer friendly. The one thing technology has proven time and time again is once Pandora's box is open, it's not going away. And this digital on-demand video is not going away. And so the studios can sit there and try and push back as much as they want, but it's a fight they're probably not going to win.
Well, Andrew, I appreciate you doing this podcast with me twice. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. We appreciate you very much. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.